Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me. It is delightful to be back in Ohio. I grew up outside of Cincinnati. And so for the first several years of my life in New York, I walked around talking about Cuyahoga County and things in Cuyahoga County. And they finally looked at me and go, "You mean Cayuga County?" Because in New York, it's Cayuga. It's spelled the same. Anyway, and I can say pop now instead of soda. It's very exciting. Thank you so much for having me. It is an absolute pleasure to be here in following Sari, who stole all my material, so I can be really quick today. Um, but really, I consider it one of, if not the best libraries in the world, having seen many of them and visited that. And that's not just a nice little, yay, no, it really is. I mean, there are some incredible libraries I've been to and serving different tasks in different communities and different people. I've seen libraries that have been built in small villages, and I've seen libraries built in huge cities. And when it comes down to it, every positive thing that you can talk about what libraries can do with having impact with education, this is an example of that. And so you should all be very proud of that Sari is, in all sincerity, one of the best libraries in the world. This, of course, is also terribly intimidating, right? Because you show up and it's like, what do I have to tell you? Except keep going. That's great. And so with that, my usual pitch is done because you're doing it all already, right? So some libraries I have to show up and convince them that libraries are more than books. And people are like, really? Yes, it's true. We do things like maker spaces. Wow, what's that? Well, it's a 3D printer that all the librarians avoid because it jams all the time. Actually, one of the original maker spaces was in Fayetteville, New York, this little itty bitty but wonderfully affluent suburban library. And they have 6 3D printers that they work with. And then over time, they actually began bringing in sewing machines, computer connected sewing machines. And the librarians are like, if that 3D printer goes down, I'm there. I'm going to fix it. That sewing machine's having problems. I'm out. They're much more terrified about, like, being electrocuted by those than hot glue guns connected to a programming board. It's online, and we have digital resources, and we have digital branches, and yeah, we get it, yeah, been there, done that, right? And it's about programming. It's not just the collection, but it's impact and connecting to people and connecting people to coders and people who are gardening, and yeah, did that. So once again, keep doing it. It's a very unmotivating speech. I apologize. And then, but libraries, the core of librarianship and the core of what libraries do is around education, and we're in the education business, right? So it's not just about coming and doing pleasure time reading and escaping from the world. It's engaging and constantly learning, and you bring up lovely quotes from Carnegie and Dewey and all these wonderful people. And we do early literacy. You can teach people pre-literacy activities. I've seen libraries that they have board books, and with the board books come actually a lesson plan for the parent and a manipulative, a toy that they can work with, right? Yawn, been there, done that. Augmented formal education, that after school programs and people coming in on a regular basis, we help them learn. And the idea of continuous lifelong learning, been there, done that. So once again, not very inspiring. GED, yeah, we get it. STEM and adult education, yeah, get it, done it. All right, so now we're on slide 4. Then I talk about participation, not consumption, that it's not just about going and getting DVDs and CDs and printed books. It's about helping communities create things, becoming truly a publisher of the community, and helping to do podcasting and video and audio presentations. And as Sari was taking me on a tour of the branches yesterday, I'm walking by the podcasting booth and 2 people recording music for distribution on iTunes. And I'm like, well, that's slide number 5. So you're doing it, and this is great. But I have to think that sometimes, like me right now, you experience God, it's great working in one of the best libraries in the world, and sometimes a bit intimidating. What do we do next? What's going to happen after this? What are we going to try? I mean, and what's great, when I talk to branch managers, when I talk to the librarians here, it's a team feeling, right? So it's not like what they're going to make me do. It's not what the next fad is. It really is, what are we going to come up? How are we going to top that? What's next? And I think that many times we come down to the idea that we want to be innovative, and it's all about innovation, it's all about new ideas. And that can be really, really, really exciting and really, really, really exhausting. I can imagine that there are times when you just wish you could check out the damn book and walk away, right? There just have to be times when you read up on the next LJ or American Libraries thing about someone is bringing back roller derby in the stacks, and you're just sitting there going, that's going to be us. We're going to have to do roller derby now, right? It has to be really sort of problematic. And I think that part of the reason that that's the case, part of the intimidation factor, part of what we have to deal with is that we have, as a social structure within society, within popular media, within the popular press, we have turned innovation into this near godlike activity where we assume that people who innovate are somehow special or different or normally live somewhere in the left coast and get venture capital and all that wonderful stuff. Or that it's got to be huge and big, and that innovation can't just be something that helps one person, it's got to help thousands and millions of people. And so we walk around with these fallacies around innovation, and I think that they can hold us back, particularly when we look at it as innovation as all of our jobs and not just the innovation person. I have been to many libraries where, by the way, they have the innovation person, either deliberately, vice president of innovation. That was, frankly, in the early 2000s when Yahoo wasn't trying to sell itself for a profit. This was the idea, this is our vice president of innovation, because apparently making up job titles was about as innovative as you needed to be. Or we have the innovation committee, one of my personal favorites, innovation by committee. What is it they say in innovation by committee? That's like when a committee designs a horse, you end up with a camel. But no, it's got to have a lump. Let's put two, yay. But we need to think of innovation differently. And so what I wanted to just quickly talk about are some of the fallacies I think we hold and how they hold us back from coming up with a new thing. And the first one is that innovation equals big invention. That innovation is somehow something that must be so large and transformational that only a few people can have that kind of intelligence to figure it out. But in fact, it's not. Innovation can be very, 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 very small. Innovation is just a matter of coming up with some new process, some new thing to improve an old process or an old thing. It's very different than invention. Oftentimes we throw those words together. We think that to innovate is to come up with something brand new, and oftentimes it's not. Oftentimes it's the application of something that someone didn't think about putting in a new context. Right? And they can have very outsized impacts that you can't even begin to anticipate. People might say, oh, but it's just this tiny little thing. But it can have massive changes. So I want to give you two quick examples. My two current favorite examples, one older, one newer. So the older one I'll go through quickly is a fellow by the name of Danny Biasone. Danny Biasone, he's dead, don't look him up, but he was a nice guy, owned the Syracuse Nationals. So many people, seeing you guys are so proud of the Cavs, go Cavs, don't realize that before the NBA, there were still professional teams, and one of the first was in Syracuse, New York. Don't ask me why. And Danny had a problem, is that he would go to these games, and he would be bored out of his mind. And he would be watching people in the audience, and they were bored out of their minds. And you may sit there, having watched the Cavs, and go, how could you be bored? It's amazing. Have to realize that at the time, it was a defensive game. So to play basketball, what happens is the minute you went up by any score, 2 points, 1 point, whatever, you sat on the ball as long as you could. Because the idea was you win with the most points, and the idea was more to prevent the other team from scoring than from you scoring. And Danny looked at this and was like, this is nuts, this is wrong, this is crazy. And he looked around and he found actually a college coach had sort of the same problem and had come up with an idea. And the idea was that once you have the ball, you only have so much time to score or you have to give up the ball. And it was called the shot clock. Right? And so Danny looked at this and Danny said, all right, so like scores were something like 21-17. I mean, really. And he said, no, I want it to be like 100-100. And he took like the optimal score in a game, divided it by the number of minutes in regulation play, came up with 24 seconds, and put up a clock right behind the backboards and said, you have 24 seconds to shoot or you lose it. Now, his goal in this was not to come up with a massive invention that cured malaria and such. His goal was to make it a slightly more exciting game and, frankly, sell a few more points. But he could never anticipate what would happen. Because the minute that happened, the game became an offensive game. You had to get it, you had to score, and you had to score quickly. Suddenly, instead of finding really small, short people who can keep the ball away, you needed very large people that could run towards and jump above and sometimes all the way above a net. And it became about slam dunks, and it became about offense, and it became a much faster game. And what turned out was even more interesting is at the time, NBC, ABC, the national networks were looking for more sports that they could cover on the air. And they had baseball. Yay. Right? And they... Sorry. Also, I mean, we're not going to go into baseball because, once again, it's knowing that the Cincinnati Reds are the best team. I'm not going to bring that up. Right? But they had football, but they were looking for something else, and suddenly they found basketball because it was fast and it was moving and it was fun to watch and interesting. And from those contracts that led to more contracts that led to the NBA, that led to $80 billion industry in basketball, all from the fact that the owner was sitting there bored. Innovation that can start as small, can start as adopting. He didn't invent the shot clock. He found it and said, it's going to work in this context. I'll give another fun one. Anyone know why the average pop song played on the air today, on the radio today, is 3 to 4 minutes long? Attention span, right? because Taylor Swift is so thin, she'll actually pass out from lack of food. It actually came because in early recording technology, like Edison early recording technology, the first way you recorded songs was on a wax cylinder. So you set up this really big unamplified horn, and it went down to a needle on a diaphragm, and you ran this cylinder of wax back and forth. And as you sang, the needle would go up and down, and then you could put another needle, it would play it back. Well, it turns out that in order to get the best fidelity they could out of wax, they could only make those cylinders a certain width, and they could only record about 3.5 minutes worth of audio. And so as recording became more and more prevalent, as more and more people got this really bizarre idea of being able to listen to the music they wanted to at home, more and more people began recording in that medium, and that medium wasn't classical music, that medium was popular music because the populace would buy those songs. And so that initial technology limitation, when they began developing new technologies from audio tape and vinyl and 45s, they kept the 3-minute time frame. And so these days, the idea that a pop song is 3 to 4 minutes, people don't think about it, but what it came from was the fact that Edison was sitting there going, not too fast, right? This is the kind of thing that we often don't think about, which is innovation doesn't have to be huge. It can save 3 minutes into a process. It can save 30 seconds in a checkout. It can save 15 minutes in setting up a room like this. It can save 5 minutes in how we sort books for moving between branches, etc. That is innovation, and it counts, and you can never, never, never anticipate the full impact that an innovation will have until you do it. And so you may end up radically changing the operations of your organization when your intention was to save yourself a few seconds. But it's worth doing, and it becomes everyone's job, not just the grand innovator that sits on high or the external consultant brought in. Everyone should be thinking about innovation. Now, the other myth that we often associate with innovation is that it's all about business, that innovation is about making money. That innovation is about going out and starting a business. And so you'll hear innovation and entrepreneurship almost always used together. And I had a brilliant student, Meg Bacchus, who's now at the Anchorage Public Library, who was studying this. And she would go to libraries and then she would ask them, do you help small businesses start? Yes. How's it going? We have no idea. She said, so do you offer classes in starting business? Yes. Do you offer services to starting business? Yes. Do any businesses get started? We have no idea. Did you ask them if they started a business? Well, that's not really our place, is it? Maybe it is. And so what happens is she realized that she would sit in and they get these big audiences where they talked about starting business, and they bring up the big head, and the first person the big head would talk about is how you had to get money and capital, and you would go ahead and put that third and fourth mortgage on your house, and you would max out your credit cards, and then you'd develop the beautiful thing of which 10% had a chance of becoming a business, and by the time they finished the spiel, the audience was gone. Because a lot of people have lots of really great ideas that they want to try out, but they're not willing to go into debt to make it happen. There is a core population, an essential population in any community, Cuyahoga County, Syracuse, New York, Columbia, South Carolina. We need people to start businesses. Very, very important. But what about everyone else that has that great, brilliant idea where they're not willing to go into the risk of capital and debt in the market, but they want to try something new? My favorite, and I'm sure many of you have heard this, current example is the people who use 3D printers to now create prosthetic hands and arms for children. Right? Someone said, well, I've got the technology. We can try it. I've got 3D. Well, let's just do it. And they weren't looking at how to make millions and billions of dollars. They just wanted to try it. And if they had to run through the gauntlet of IPOs, and here's how you get a lawyer, and this is limited liability, and here are your tax consequences, they would have never had a 5-year-old show up and be able to use a hand. They said, all I need is some help. I need someone who understands the 3D printer. I need someone who understands this modeling program. And so what Meg pointed out is innovation isn't necessarily tied to business. It can be just an idea. And what libraries can do better than almost any other institution on the planet is we can provide people to the most necessary thing they need to turn the innovation into reality. And it's not capital, it's not a market, and it's not a loan. It's other people. We can provide access to the masses. When my wife started a mom's club, and it started as a group of friends, and they wanted to figure out, how do I deal with this 3-year-old in the middle of the day? Please, God, let's go to a donut shop and leave them there. And pretty soon, 3 people turned to 10 people, turned to 40 people, and guess where they had their meetings? In the public library, and they would talk about, well, let's plan this and plan that. And then it turned into 100 people and 300 people, and they couldn't fit anywhere. But they also realized that parents have 3-year-olds, 2-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 50-year-olds, and they all need different things. That there are a lot of people, for example, I have my niece is coming in for the day, I need an extra high chair, anyone got a high chair? Hey, I'm moving, I'm going to get rid of the chest, does anyone need this? Hey, I have a crib. This is a true story. I have my children's crib that my wife they're 13 and 16, and my wife refuses to get rid of this crib because someday there'll be grandkids. Turns out, however, if we put our grandkids in the crib, it will be illegal. Oh dear, sorry, that's got to go. This idea that we can connect people together. What happened is he now has 3,500 moms and dads doing parenting, and they build a virtual network of exchange of ideas, exchange and coordination. She needs infrastructure for that. How do I set that up? How do I schedule it? How do I do a calendaring system? Is there a way to do Facebook managing? How do I learn to do Facebook? Well, sometimes librarians know that, but sometimes there are other people in the community that can help do that. And it's a worthwhile and valuable thing to do. So innovation doesn't have to turn into a dollar sign at the end of the day. It can turn into better adjusted children and calmer, nicer parents. Don't know about nicer, but anyway. So the other one is making for all. That there's a sense that innovation only occurs in the presence of a 3D printer. That it's the idea that it's all about everyone's a maker. Now, here's the trick about making technology. And Sari and I at dinner last night, she had a wonderful phrase that I love, which is it's the idea is we need to innovate, not imitate. That it's not just going, it's a trend, let's go do this, right? Because we have somewhere, even with your building plan, I'm guessing somewhere you have microfiche hidden in these branches. Or microfilm, yes? A couple 8mm films hanging around somewhere, right? Someone once described a public library as the sort of graveyard of technologies past. They're still around, right? But this idea that there's a trend, it's 3D printing, we got to have this. If you look at the demographics of people who are self-identified in the maker community, as seen by the subscribers to Maker magazine, overwhelmingly male, like 80-90% male. Overwhelmingly with at least a college education and normally postgraduate education. Average salary, nearing $100,000 and white. Is this really what we want to replicate? 3D printers, creators, makerspaces, electronic routers, all the things I've seen here are wonderful technologies that can democratize access to manufacturing, can allow people to experiment and find new job opportunities. But we cannot assume that just because we have the technology, it will turn into that group showing up. unless we take the time to go into low-income and underserved areas, unless we take the time to provide education and connection, unless we take the time to mentor and bring up populations that traditionally have been left out of that technology, it will simply be a really interesting fad that doesn't necessarily help anyone. So we have to look at innovation, not as technology around making for entrepreneurship, and it's got to be big. We have to look at innovation as making people's lives better, even if it's a little bit. And it's everyone's job to innovate, not just the idea of, oh, that's the grand poobah of innovation over there. It's everyone's job. It's everyone's job, from maintenance to secretarial to librarians to administrator to, as we will get into, the communities around us to innovate how and what we do. And why do we do this? So the other piece of sort of innovation tension that happens, right? You are the best library in the world, congratulations, keep it up, is what's next? Well, sorry, so we're going to innovate. We're going to do all this stuff, and it doesn't have to be big, and we buy that. But what is it that drives innovation? Why is it that we want to change things? When is it time to say we're done with that? The microfiche can go away. When is it time to retire the 8mm films? When is it time for us to think about something different? And the two most important questions that you have to ask yourself going forward are why and why not? Because each of these questions separately will get you into trouble. Right? The why question is often always phrased, and I call this the Muppet version of why. Why? It's what I give my 16-year-old when they come in, and he's just decided to unplug all my laptops so that they have zero power at the end of the day. Why? It's what happens when my 13-year-old decides that archery is pretty cool and the side of the house makes a great target. Why? Not that why. Right? Why do we do this? We'll get to the why not in a second, but why do we do this? Why do we have creation spaces? Why do we have self-checkout systems? Why do we think it's a good thing that we have DVDs and CDs? Why do we think it's a good thing to have collections of books at all? Why? Because if we don't have that why, if we don't have some fundamental narrative, what's going to happen is that libraries are going to become really interesting hodgepodges of customer-demanded service without any integrity. And over time, our communities, when they look at those tax and millages and levies and they go to say we need more librarians, more space, more whatever, are going to begin to ask the question, why? What holds this together? I'm guessing you already have seen it, whether you've been part of having focus groups or you've just had people walk in and they go up to you and they say, why do you allow teenagers to check out quiet meeting rooms? Why did libraries transform themselves from quiet buildings with a few loud rooms in them to loud buildings with a few quiet rooms in them? Right? We hear that a lot. Why? What holds it together? What's the secret sauce? I did many discussions and we talk about volunteer activity and customer-generated activity and all this wonderful stuff. And invariably people will ask me, well, what's the difference between this and a community center? And I ask them what's wrong with being the center of a community. But then I move on to the idea of there is something fundamental. That word library isn't just a title that we pick outside of the building. When many of you got a degree in library science, it wasn't so that you could learn how to do party planning. Because it should be, right? I mean, let's face it, if we had a good class, we should offer a class in party planning for half of what you do. I get it. Right? When many of you came and either began volunteering or you began looking for a job or you were attracted some way to the library as a place to do it, there was something that was unique and special about this mission, about this task. And it's not just that we do whatever people come in. Eli Nyberger at the Ann Arbor District Library has an electronic, comment card. My favorite comment he ever got was, what can the library do better? More pie and prostitutes. And before you laugh too hard, how many of you have a cafe? It's a slippery slope, I'm telling you. What is it that connects us? What is the origin? What is it that links us back to the field? And I'm going to argue to you that the why of what it is that we do and why we do it is around learning. And this is different. This is different from if you were to ask what is the core of a library service in 1950, in 1960, even in 1990, and frankly, I'm still having a few arguments. And they would say, no, the core, what makes a library is our resources, our collection. It's about information. How many people feel that they can come up with a quick, easy definition for information? I can't. I have a PhD in it, and I can't. I talked to 10 different faculty members, and I came up with 11 different definitions, my favorite of which was, I don't know and I don't care. Okay. Information is a conversational lubricant invented by people because we can't define that magic sauce. What do you do? I'm in the information business. What does that mean? I don't know. I'm an information professional. Excellent. Are there information amateurs? Yes, they're over here. Information, is it data, is it whatever? I don't know, but what I do know is knowledge. What I know is learning. What I know is when people make better decisions, when people get smarter, I can evaluate it, I can look at the impact of it. So ultimately what we're about is not divvying up and organizing stuff. Those are just the tools. It's like defining a doctor because they use a stethoscope, right? Those tools are going to change. But what we do it for is learning. Why are we here? Now that learning, right? Couple of things. The mission of a library is to improve society. Really, because that's really why we're here. We want to believe that Cuyahoga County is a better place, a better society, a better group of citizens, a better environment because we're here, right? We would argue that we are here to make things better. And this is very different because not everyone can make that argument. So we have a noble purpose in mind. And we do it by facilitating knowledge creation in our communities. We do it by making our communities smarter. When they make a purchasing decision, when they make a parenting decision, when they make a retirement decision, when they make an employment decision, when they make an investment decision, when they make a reading decision, and please God, when they make a presidential decision, we want them to be smarter when they do it. Now notice I didn't name an individual candidate, so you're welcome to add whatever one you want. Knowledge creation, we want smarter communities. We want communities. Right now I'm leaving Syracuse University, so I'm allowed to pick on it. They just announced the other day they're going to spend $6 million making a promenade through campus with heated sidewalks, right? Now, heated sidewalks are not as dumb as you might think in Syracuse, New York, because it keeps you from having to shovel them and ice and getting killed and some fun things like that. And 108 faculty members wrote and said, maybe there are a few things that we could spend a $6 million on other than bricks, right? Is it a wise decision? Isn't it a wise decision? I actually am not going to take the right or wrong on that one, but we want to believe that there are better decisions. When communities talk about economic development, when we talk about redevelopment phases, when we talk about zoning decisions, when we talk about where the polling places will be, when we talk about education and education budgets, we want those to be informed decisions. And that's ultimately a learning problem. What we're doing is not entertaining. What we're doing is not distracting. What we're doing is not telling, don't pay attention. Quite the opposite. We want engaged citizenry. The public library is a place where a community that governs itself must itself be educated. We want the best decisions occurring. And so for many years, we have focused on the tools of learning. Books, databases, computers, computer access, iPads, etc. We have focused on these things that can be used in learning, that can be used in creating knowledge. And all too often, we mistook them for knowledge itself. There is no place more full of lies, misinformation, and deceit than a good academic library. Right? You need to know what's right and what's wrong. You need positive and negative examples. How many of you right now feel that if you went into your branch, within 10 minutes you could identify a book that you're embarrassed to have on the shelf? Right? There are whole blogs devoted to what we find. What the hell? Right? Why do we have them? Well, we have them because we don't know how other people are going to use them, interpret them, understand them. Right? If you teach evolution, you need books on creationism, not because you agree with creationism, but oftentimes so you can refute it. Scholars on environmentalism need not only information on global warming, they need information by global warming deniers, not because there isn't scientific consensus that the globe is warming, but because they need to understand both sides of it, not to claim or adopt both sides, but often to refute the other. We understand that the best decisions, the smartest decisions made in a community come from the richest, most diverse information sources, I use the information word, resources available to them. Right? We believe that. So we have these things. And for the first time, as Pew Internet Life went and surveyed people on library usage and library perceptions and public library, for the first time, we have a trend where people are beginning to say it's okay to have fewer accessible books on the floor to allow for more learning spaces. The perception of our communities are changing. When we used to walk into a room, we assumed we had to start with the "we're more than books" slogan. And we're finding increasingly when we walk into our communities, they're like, yeah, we know, move on. That didn't happen by accident. That didn't happen just for the sake of it. It happened because as libraries and library members and staff, we have advocated for it, we have shown it, we have done Libraries Transform, we have shown the Bill of Rights, we have worked very hard. If you ever want to read a fabulous book on the history of librarianship, Wayne Wiggin wrote a great one on the history of public libraries, and he talks about at the turn of the 19th century, how there was public outcry by politicians, editorials, and newspapers to keep a certain type of information out of our libraries, to keep our libraries stacking these types of resources because it polluted the minds of our youth. It was at the time the anti-porn campaign, but it wasn't pornography that they were talking about. They were talking about the literary novel. At the turn of the century, editorial after editorial after editorial said, why do public libraries stack novels? All they are for are women of the night, I'm not making this up, that lead girls to think beyond their stations and boys to dream beyond the farmhouse. That literary novels were dangerous because it gave people aspirations. That changed not because libraries sat back and waited for the world to understand that reading is reading and learning is learning and knowledge occurs in all its richness. It happened because librarians, library staff, and library organizations advocated, demonstrated, showed that to be true. We change how a community views us. We change how it views itself. We must instead be in the learning itself. It's not enough to stack up a bunch of books on literacy and leave a 2-year-old overnight in a library and expect them to read. It doesn't work that way. I've tried it. I've gone through this case. They didn't arrest me. Right? It doesn't work. Right? It takes time. It takes parents sitting with children and teachers sitting with children. And it takes manipulatives and it takes librarians giving them story times and tasks. It takes work around reading and learning. Right? So we need to be focused on that. Not these. These, they're great. They're important. Book, probably the greatest invention next to the wheel, probably beats the wheel. I want to tell you. I think it says the wheel beat. And it works really great, but it's not the only reason we're here. They're here because it lets us do our job, which is learning, knowledge creation, smarter communities. And we know something about learning. Learning is participatory. Learning doesn't happen by this. This is the worst type of learning. Congratulations. Right? It's the worst type of learning because at some point in this talk you went, oh my God, what did he just say? No, right? It happened because at some point it's stuck. It's me good, you bad. Me no, you learn. Right? This is crap. We know that we learn by trying things, by manipulating them, by breaking things, by burning things. Back to my children. We know that it happens in conversation. It's loud. It's participatory. If you want to learn, you've got to get involved. Justin Henke, when he was at Chattanooga Public Library, got a 3D printer, and rather than taking it to his office and figured it out, because it came in pieces, he put it right in the middle of the youth area and began assembling it. As people walked by, he said, hey, what do you think? Hey, can you try this? He said at one point they had to take literally a hammer and chisel because they had this mound of plastic over the extruder head. Now, many of us, and the hardest thing that library staff have to realize is the hardest thing about serving our communities these days is not the plastic and the 3D printer and the technology. It is this simple act. Stepping around the desk, stepping and talking to someone, sitting down with them, realizing that we learn not me to you, but side by side. That we admit that we don't know things, that we show our ignorance because at the same time we show our greatest aspiration, which is to learn in public and around people. We gain their trust not simply by giving them authority, but by demonstrating that we are learning too, that we are of the community, not for the community. We know that it's social. We know that people learn together, that we create interest groups. We know that they learn from fiction and nonfiction, and we know that learning is lifelong and continuous. It doesn't end when you graduate. In fact, more and more of it happens in this continuous cycle. That's the why. Why do we do this? Why do we have 3D printers? Why do we have why do we have book collections? Why do we have buildings? Why do we do these things? Because they enable learning. It's inquiry-driven, it's aspirational. People come and get smarter, right? Why do you need the public library? To save money. No. You want to save money? Close all the libraries. All that tax dollars can go back. You'll be stupid as hell. It would be a bad choice, right? So yes, we save some money, but really what we do is we save you from yourself. We save you from being stupid. Now, we don't want to put that on the card. That's probably not the next t-shirt to come out. But if you think about it, my job is to help you learn. Think about how it changes everything in how you do, right? Instead of coming up to the desk and saying things like, may I help you? Have you ever thought about how that phrase, may I help you? On one hand, we think of it as our ultimate altruism, our ultimate service call. How can I help you? It's back to that Muppet version. But think of it also as potentially the most arrogant thing that you've ever said. How can I help you? Think about how many times we put our folks, our communities in the position of admitting ignorance in public. Think about what kind of load we are putting on their self-esteem to come up and in a public setting admit they don't know something. And what do? How can I help you? Because I have a degree and I'm smart and I know. What if instead we ask the question, what are you passionate about? What are you learning today? That question opens up a conversation. Because we know it's like when someone comes up to the reference desk and they say, I really need to know how to give birth. Really? You guys, I'm looking that story up, right? And the first answer is, well, have you checked Google? That's the insulting question, isn't it? It's like, well, let's see. And I woke up this morning and breathed too. Yes, I checked Google, right? What are you learning today? What's going on? Because we know that people who ask us questions oftentimes know more about the topic than we do. And having them invite us into their learning process rather than assume that we're going to inform them from outside changes the dynamic. You want to talk about what to do with your volunteers? Don't turn them into little librarians. Don't take someone, usually, let's be honest, the demographic is usually older. People who have either retired and had this huge lifelong skill where they're doctors and engineers and plumbers and teachers. And we take them, we say, now you can check out books and help us sort and shelve. What do you do? What are you passionate about? Well, I was a lawyer. Would you mind giving some things on starting businesses or legal information? I was an accountant. Can you do things on taxes? They're your collection. The community is our collection, and they're the ones that we work with. So why do we do it? We do it around learning. We do it to make our community smarter. And then the important question, why not? Why not? And Sari already said this. Nostalgia is a horrible way of determining whether you do something or don't. Well, we've always done it. Right? That's how we've done it in the past. The hardest thing you can ask a staff member of any rank, privilege, or background to do is to stop doing something that they started. We're not going to do the microfiche anymore. Well, we have to do the microfiche. No one wants the microfiche. But I started this 30 years ago, and I built a beautiful collection, and I've just about gotten it perfect. Oftentimes, the reason it doesn't work is because they've invested so much of themselves, which is a positive. They own it, so they've done a lot of self-direction. They worry about quality, which is a positive. And what they hear when we say we're not going to do it is it's no longer worthwhile. And they retroactively take that as an insult back for 30 years of their career. When in fact, what we need to do is thank God you did that. That now allows us to do this. Thank God you put that fiche together and we understand it, and it was so vital and important that we are now able to move forward into a new task, a new effort, a new thing. We need to celebrate when we close things, not mourn them. Because it's not, we're not getting rid of them because they have no value or never had value, but because we are in an evolutionary process, and that's how you push forward, is you try new things, and some of them stick. Because that's the other part of innovation. How many of you have been to college and ever wondered why you took one course equaled 3 credit hours? Right, one course, 3 credit hours. Why? Turns out it came because of a bribe. I love these stories. So it's the 1800s, you're at Harvard, you're the new dean of education, and you're tired of the fact that what people enroll at Harvard and most colleges in higher education at the time, you enroll in a course. And a course isn't a course. A course means a course of study. And there's no such thing as electives, and there's no such thing as change, and normally it's indentured servitude to a professor. And as a Harvard professor, you say, we need to introduce some way that people can have flexibility in their courses of study. We need some way that they can take electives. I'm kidding you not. Turns out this particular Harvard professor was also on the board of the Carnegie Foundation. And the Carnegie Foundation, who was very interested in improving higher education, said, you're right, we need to change this. How do we do it? He said, what we do is let's adopt this course hour thing. It'll define sort of a limit, and then we can define things into blocks, and we can move blocks around. Great, let's do that. How can we get academics to do that? Because if you've heard of herding cats is easy. You open food, cats come. You try to herd faculty, you open food, and they come and say, is that gluten-free? Right? So what they did was they bribed them. They said, you know what, professors, you don't have a really good retirement or pension plan. I, as Carnegie, am going to invest several million, today's dollars, billions of dollars, into something called TIAA, the Teachers Insurance Association, which was the initial retirement package. It's still my retirement package. And by the way, if you want to be part of this retirement package, you have to adopt a course hour. And that's why we call them Carnegie units, right? That idea of how we move people, how we incent them, how we celebrate, how we move things forward. And once again, back to the innovation idea, sometimes these ideas show their time. Right now, our problem in higher education is we're stuck with 3-hour credit unions. We're stuck with something that has to take a semester long. We're stuck with 14 contact hours. When we know that there are certain things that I can teach you in 5 minutes, there's certain things that are going to take me 2 years. There's times that you want to learn over a 5-year process instead of over a semester process. And so we're stuck with an innovation. What we need to celebrate it, say, thank you, Andrew Carnegie, and move on. What else can we do here? And one last word, and then I will shut up. With an emphasis, and I think a good emphasis on innovation, we oftentimes neglect the fact that once you innovate, once you come up with a new workflow, once you develop a new process, once you have a new grand idea, someone's got to make it work for the next 10 years, the next 20 years, maybe the next year. And so for all too often, our focus on innovation, we ignore the maintainers. Someone's got to worry about, are the books still shelved? Are the doors going to open on time? Have we invested in the HVAC system so when a particularly hot summer comes, we're not leaking on ourselves? Maintenance, and I mean physical maintenance, intellectual maintenance, staff maintenance, process maintenance, keeping things running in infrastructure is essential. And so we need to say, one, you may have what you consider to be the most routine job. Everything from physical maintenance to cataloging to whatever it is. That's an essential job. And you can innovate in there. They're tied together. We need to understand that innovation comes not just in what's brand new, but sometimes better ways of doing what we know works. Summer reading, please. Summer reading, we have great data. It shows great importance. It shows that for particularly at-risk children, keep their reading levels up over the summer. That's fabulous. Can we do it better? Can we understand different ways of doing it, but make sure that we're doing it on a regular basis? So understand that even if what you're doing is you feel like you're keeping the wheels going, those wheels need to keep going. And if you can figure out some easier way to do it, then do it. Ultimately, what we have to do in all of this is we have to tear down walls. Now, Sari and I will disagree on this probably pretty profoundly. What do we call them? What do we call the people who walk in and utilize our services? Are they consumers? Are they customers? Or are they users? How many people feel right now that you do absolutely great user support? You create great user experiences. I've terrified you all. It's okay. How many of you enjoy being used? How many would like to use consume next? All right? These words mean things. Customer means something. Now, I want to be really clear. What a community decides to call themselves, what a branch decides to call themselves, I don't care if it's customer, consumer, czar, communist, I don't care. But when we use those words, we need to be very aware of what they mean. And one of the things I have an issue with is when government services treats me as a customer. Because do I have another place I can go frequent if I don't want to pay my taxes to this government? Right? If I want to get a license and I'm not happy with the customer services I'm receiving from the DMV, can I become a customer to someone else? And worse, if I don't like what the DMV is doing or if I don't like what this government is doing and I'm their customer, no, I'm responsible. I voted or didn't vote or put it in or participated or watched. I am a citizen. I am part of this system. And so we have to think rather than customer or consumer. And once again, I want to be really clear. What we put on the literature, what it goes out there, that's fine. But in our minds, if we look at the people that we are helping to get smarter as not us, if we look at it as them, and this turns into what we call the remedial view of librarianship. Our job is to help them because they don't read well enough. Our job is to help them because they don't have good enough access. They're broken, they're wrong. Our job, we're going to come in and help them. If we continue in that, eventually the community will look at us and say, we're a little tired of being told what we don't do well. And what they want to do is they want to be part of it. When they walk in and they look at the beautiful buildings, your president was saying, I didn't anticipate that's what it could look like. But part of the celebration is that they now understand they're part of that. They are responsible in some way for that. Whether it's paying a tax dollar, whether it's showing up at the meeting, whatever it is, they have ownership. Instead, let's think of them as members. They are a member of the library with rights and privileges and a card. There are allies. There are neighbors. They're part of us. As they succeed, we succeed. As we create a smarter, better community to live in, we have a smarter and better community to live in. When those volunteers come in, it is not simply saying, oh, let's entertain them. We're part of it together. When that 13-year-old comes in and says, your Minecraft sucks, I'm going to do a better job, your answer is to say, yes, you do a better job. And you're part of the library for doing it. I mean, we look at the idea of having library fellows, someone who's really smart. We're going to give you a title of a library fellow. We look at that going, great, they can use the break room. They look at it as, I have a title. I'm important. I have self-worth and self-value. The way you get ownership and self-worth and value and therefore support is you make them part of you at the process and you break down those barriers. And just as we break down the barriers with those who serve, we must continuously break down the barriers within our own team. That we cannot play this idea that you are librarian and you are not librarian. You are on the top of the pecking order, you are at the bottom of the pecking order. I don't sense that, but it's a continuous watchword that we must always look at. Because the truth is that it doesn't matter what your title is, what your pay grade is, what your rank. If you have a good idea, damn it, it's a good idea. And it should be part of it. You can be a librarian by your credentials and what you got in college. You can be a librarian by title, or you can be a librarian by spirit. We know people who may not have the MLS that are just about as influenced, impressed, and advocating our values, our premise, and our importance. This is what we need to look at. We need to tear down walls amongst ourselves and for ourselves. Ultimately, my last message to you, and then I will be quiet and we can take some questions, is that congratulations. You are one of the best public libraries, one of the best libraries, period, in the world. Sincerely, congratulations, and you deserve it. But with that comes an obligation, comes a responsibility. If you are the best library in the world and you do the best job for people in Cuyahoga County, and people are suffering in Cleveland, and people are suffering in Cincinnati, and people are suffering in Ghana, and people are suffering in Shanghai, then what we've done is create an island in a society that needs more help. We have an obligation to lead and innovate. As you come up with new ideas, you have an obligation to share them amongst yourselves, regardless of class, amongst your geography, amongst the profession. We must look at an obligation at every level, not just administrators, not just librarians, but everyone is an innovator. And it's going to require an investment in all of those folks as well. When I heard that these sessions are open not just to librarians, but everyone on the team, that was amazing. We need to sit together on a regular basis and pay to send people to conferences regardless of their degree. We need to take the time to do continuous education. We need to send people to conferences not just so that they can learn what's going on, but they can present and teach and share. You are all now deputized missionaries in the world of librarianship to speak on a regular basis of what great things happen here, what great things are to come, and to share them with the world. This is the noble profession that we have made ourselves part of. Every day we are stuck with things like finding the lost USB drive, figuring out what that is on the floor, understanding what the copier is doing. Every day you will find something that will beat the humanity out of you. And when you have those times, when you just are going to explode, realizing that if you did, you'd have to clean it up. Every time. Understand that regardless of your rank, title, position, you are part of a noble endeavor. Jamie LaRue says you are part of probably the second greatest story ever told by mankind. That at that level, we have seen it to improve, to move forward as a species, to move forward as a civilization. We must have an advocate in the public sphere that believes in knowledge and learning, that believes in equity, that believes in privacy, that believes in empowerment, that believes that no person should be limited to their ability to learn by their geography or their bank account. Those noble missions, every day, is what it means to come in and work here. Why do we innovate? Why do we lead? Not for arrogance, not for prestige. We come because everyone deserves what the citizens of Cuyahoga County have today. And we're going to continue to reinvent, redefine, and be part of that innovation moving forward. I have no doubt that you have the team, the space, and the resources to do it. I look forward to watching as it happens. Thank you very much for your time.